I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Friday, October the 25th, brought to you in part by Norfenacol by Norbrook. Norfenacol helps you get to the bottom of BRD fast. It reaches therapeutic blood levels in the lungs within 30 minutes of being administered. For more information, go to norbrook.com. Also, Unionville Livestock Market and Creston Livestock Markets in north central Missouri and south central Iowa. Unionville Livestock Market had their big sale on Tuesday, their big special. They've got a regular cattle sale coming up this Tuesday, the 29th. Then they've got special calf and yearling sales scheduled every Tuesday in November. Be sure to check those out as they approach. Also, Creston Livestock in Creston, Iowa, they've got a regular sale here today on Friday, another regular sale next Friday, and then a big special all vaccinated calf and yearling sale coming up on Wednesday, November the 6th. Back to 190. Tell you what, this market has really come on strong here right in the middle of fall, and our fat cattle market has been up for 7 weeks now, and back up to 190. That's a kind of a big threshold there, so we're not that far from all-time record highs again, guys, and it looks like it's going to continue here for a while. We've got really strong fundamentals, and the fundamentals are actually working. But you know, this fat market really came alive on Thursday morning fairly early with the Fed Cattle Exchange through Central Stockyards, their online bidding platform. They sold commodity cattle in Texas through competitive bidding and transparency at 189 pretty early on Thursday morning, and I mean bang, it just it sparked things. And then shortly after that we saw trading in the country at that, and then it got up to 190, and actually the Southern Plains kind of sparked that. They're shorter of cattle in the Southern Plains than they are in the Northern Plains. And then by later in the afternoon on Thursday, we saw packers paying 191, 192, even in western Nebraska, to be shipped to Kansas for slaughter. So like, that's all fundamental stuff, guys, and it's working. It's keeping a fire built under this thing, keeping a fire under our yearling feeders, and our calves selling really well. And people are sick of these balling calves, but they're still buying them. A lot of people are having a lot of trouble with them. Not so much trouble with those with 2 rounds, even though they're unweaned. But every week there starts to be more and more weaned calves and bigger long strings of weaned calves. And soon the discount on the ballers is going to be so much that people are going to be very frustrated if they haven't weaned their calves. But they should have thought of that before. But been here in Missouri all week. Got two speaking engagements down. I got 3 to go. Going to be in Houston, Missouri on Friday night. Going to be in Wheatland, Missouri on Saturday night. And then on Monday be at Buck Ridge production sale, and that's in Seymour, Missouri. So hope to see some of you guys there. But talking to these producers, small producers for the most part, that are showing up at these events, and Missouri sale barn owners, a lot of them that I've known for many, many years, they are very frustrated with this mandatory EID that's coming down. And for the most part, these small producers that I'm talking to at these different events, they didn't know anything about it. And they're just kind of big-eyed about it. They can't believe that they're going to have EID tags in their breeding stock and any of their intact stock, heifers and bulls that are over 18 months. And then, as we know, any of us that have our eyes open know that they will, next thing they're going to push is the all classes. And everybody knows it's impossible. And like I was saying, your sale barns, your producers are very disappointed in the trade associations that don't have policy for mandatory EID, yet they still are showing signs of supporting it. They're hosting steak dinners to bring producers in and telling them how great it's going to be, and they're not saying anything about the all classes. And I'll admit that they haven't announced that they are going to make all classes mandatory, but it's in the plan that they've been following to a T step for step, starting with the dairy cattle, then moving to the breeding stock, and it's absolutely going to be on all classes. They keep talking about how this is such a great deal because it's under the umbrella of tracking down the diseases and disease traceability. It's not doing anything more to trace disease than what we were doing before. Maybe a little bit easier to read some of those tags if you're running them through, but as far as disease traceability, nothing. Remember 20 years ago they talked about animal ID and they were going to make it mandatory back then, maybe more than 20 years ago. And they were talking about the same type of thing, but they were actually going to track the movement of cattle. And this one does not include that. And thankfully they had tried to include horses when they tried to do it a couple of decades ago, and there was enough horse enthusiasts and horse owners in our lawmaking that we got that shut down. What's going to come along and help this, I don't know. I'm still thinking and hearing that there's a possibility of a lawsuit that's going to be filed, and likely that would cause an injunction there and probably hold the deal off on the breeding stock, and we could cause a bigger stink then and maybe shut down the all classes before they start talking about it too much. But a lot of things went on this week. You notice at McDonald's, it was right after Trump had got there and worked at McDonald's for a few minutes, and a few minutes longer than Kamala had ever worked at McDonald's. And then right after that we started hearing stories about McDonald's having E. coli, and some people thought maybe that was a punishment for McDonald's. But indeed they did have an E. coli outbreak in some of their restaurants. They had some people get sick. Supposedly they had one person that died from it. But it was not in the beef. It was in the onions. So don't let that get you down about your beef. Everything was good with as far as beef goes in McDonald's. And of course they sell a pile of it, guys. But some other things that went on. We do have some lawmakers that are on the cattle side, and they are doing a lot of good. Governor Youngkin from Virginia, he donates his salary, much like Trump did whenever he was president, but he donates his salary, and he gave half of his quarterly salary to Virginia Cattlemen's Association Foundation to help with disaster relief from the storms that got up there in Southern Virginia. And we got to give it to him. I tell you what, he's a level-headed, common sense type of a governor there. And he's doing a good job for them, and we're glad that he's given it to a cattlemen's association there, and they've got a really good cattlemen's association there in Virginia, and proud to know those guys. Some sad news, did hear that Wayne Cruz of Continental Livestock in Fort Collins, Colorado, passed away late this past week, so we feel for his family and all of his friends there. Let's talk about your board on Thursday. October live cattle futures, and your futures were all up and regaining all of last week's or all of Wednesday's losses, except for your back months on feeder cattle. They were up, but not nearly as much as they were down on Wednesday. But on Thursday, October live cattle futures up 167 at 189.30. December was up 137 at 189.25. And your back months on live cattle were up 32 cents to up 132. So good gains, and man, it's just amazing how supportive this live cattle futures has been. And what sparked it going up was that higher trade that come out early this week that I told you about at the beginning of this report. And it's good to see the futures responding to cash instead of the other way around. But October feeder cattle futures up 82 cents at 249.40. November was up $1.30 at 248.52. Your back months were all up, but not nearly as much as they were down. So we've lost some position on coverage prices on the back months there, but they were still up 67 to up 170. That's not terrible. December corn was up 2.5 cents a bushel at 421.5. November beans down 1 1/4 cent at 996 1/4. Hard red winter wheat for December up 1.5 cents a bushel at 587. Your fat cattle trade brought to you by Legacy Beef Cooperative, guys. You want to ensure your opportunity to slaughter your cattle in that new packing plant being built near Council Bluffs, Iowa, guys, and they're going to be basing those prices off the wholesale beef market and not the futures or anything else. So check that out. How about your Iowa fed cattle sales in a negotiated manner? They sold 5,800 head on Thursday negotiated. It only had about 400 more than that prior to that. But live sales in Iowa on Thursday, 189 to mostly 190, and dress sales at 298. Nebraska, 7,200 head confirmed sales before 2 o'clock on Thursday, at just about 200 or 300 more than that prior to Thursday morning. But live sales in Nebraska, 190 to 192. Like I said, those higher prices being paid from some of those cattle being shipped down south into Kansas for slaughter. Some dress market sales in Nebraska were at 298. So we're mostly $2 higher there on your live cattle and $2 higher in your dress trade there in the northern plains. Kansas sold 4,400 on Thursday from 188 to mostly 190, and that would be $2 higher. Texas sold 2,400 head. I'm sure they had more sales later in the afternoon after the 2 o'clock deadline for packers to turn that information in, but they're awfully lax turning that stuff in whenever the market's higher. But the confirmed prices in Texas on Thursday were 189, which started out early on the Fed Cattle Exchange, and then 190. Had a fat cattle auction in Sheldon, Iowa on Thursday, 426 head of slaughter cattle, and they sold mostly $1 higher, in spots as much as $5 higher. Conventional fed cattle at Sheldon, Iowa bring 183 to 190, 150, and program cattle from 187.5 to 191. Box beef cutout values were some lower on the choice, a little more on the select. Choice cuts on Thursday afternoon down 24 cents at $321.17. Your selects down $1.43 at $294.34. Your slaughter got a little more aggressive later in the week and then surpassed last week with your estimated slaughter on cattle up through the first 4 days of the week at 491,000. That's 3,000 better than last week at this point and 11,000 less than a year ago at this point. Your actual slaughter information come back for the week ending October the 12th, and your average dressed steer carcass weight at a whopping 950 pounds. That is 23 pounds bigger than the same report a year ago. That's how they're making up for the light numbers of cattle, guys. Talk about what else is going on. Livestock Risk Services with Dakota Moss. They are your LRP specialists. He and these other agents that work along with him, and they want you to keep an eye on those out front coverage prices there. If you like those, you'd like to lock those in, get a hold of them. They'll tell you about how all of it works, but you can't do it today, not on Friday, because the new rule, you can't write LRPs on cattle on feed Friday. We are going to have a cattle on feed report here today on Friday at 2 o'clock Central. We'll be telling you all about that early next week, guys. Let's talk about your feeder cattle market, your real-time index on DVAuction based on an 800-pound cash auction steer with well over 20,000 head in the pot. Late on Thursday, sitting at 248.14, absolutely steady with the end of the previous day. That's amazing. That hardly ever happens, but you know, it's a weighted average from 7 to 899 pounds, just like your CME cash feeder cattle index, which the latest available there was 249.56. Talk about some big sales coming up here on Friday. St. Onge Livestock, St. Onge, South Dakota, expecting 8,000 calves, and they all be fancy, guys. Here today on Friday, you can watch them on DVAuction.com. Get a hold of them early if you want to bid. I was talking to Justin Tupper about his offering on Thursday, and he said that, you know, I'd mentioned on the previous feeder flash that they only had about 3 months to make hay there, and he said, 3 months, hell, he said, I've only got about 45 days. I sold the bulk of my cattle for the year in 45 days there, having 2 and 3 sales a week there. Also, Rich Robertson at Crawford, Nebraska, Crawford Livestock Market, he's got a big sale, about 4,400 fancy calves in Crawford. They're also on DVAuction.com, and included in his offering on Friday, he's got a big dispersal for Matt Ty. It'll be 255 head of fancy bred cows, mostly young guys. The bulk of those will be 3 and 4 year olds, and they will be fancy red cows. And Rich told me that you could easily get a big pot load of 3-year-old red Angus bred cows there. And man, who wouldn't want that? They're hard to find. Get your hands on them, guys. Let's talk about your big sales on Thursday. How about Farmers and Ranchers Livestock in Salina, Kansas? They had 2,500 there. The market, for the most part, they called $2 to $6 higher. They are expecting, they are going to have their first big Tuesday calf sale coming up this Tuesday, and they're going to have a big run, at least 4,000 head for that. Another market that they didn't have the federal state market report out on, but your National Beef Wire stick-out sale of the day was at Winter Livestock in Pratt, Kansas. About 3,300 head whenever I pulled that market from Cattle Market Central. And you look at your best tested weights, and they were impressive. It was a calf special that they had, but they had 263 head of 4-weight steer calves in Pratt. They averaged 464 with a weighted average price of $321.32. 548 head of the 5-weight steer calves in Pratt, Kansas, averaged 560 pounds at $287.75. 562 head of the 6-weight steer calves averaged 654, weighted average price $265.61. Look at the heifers. 213 head of 4-weight heifer calves averaged 464 at $268.43. 427 head of 5-weight heifer calves averaged 547, $254.21. And 347 head of the 6-weight heifer calves averaged 645 at $240.42. Look at some other places where they had high individual quotes. How about a market we've never talked about before? Beaverhead Livestock Auction in Dillon, Montana. They sell 59 Pee-wee steer calves, weighed 393 and bring 387.50. Big time quote from way up there in western Montana. How about Stockman's Livestock Exchange in Dickinson, North Dakota? Recent edition of DVAuction broadcasting there. I was talking to my buddy John Fisher, and he gave me the heads up on 66 head of unweaned 637-pound steer calves that bring $300.50. Pretty impressive there. How about Bluegrass Stockyard South in Stanford, Kentucky? They were just our stick-out sale of the month, or our market of the month this past month. They sell 72 steers, weigh 809 pounds through the ring in Stanford, Kentucky at $260. But the most impressive quote that I saw anywhere on Thursday, and of course your Macrocin No BS top quote for the day, was some yearlings that sold at the calf special in Pratt, Kansas. 60 head of those weighed 840 pounds and bring $267. And that's your feeder flash for Friday.